Thank you so much. Thank you. And really wonderful to be on with this incredible group of learners and with this quick run through of the last seven dapim and a little preview of the next seven dapim of Tractate Sukkot. I should say, Tractate Sukkah. Let me get it right. I wanted just to mention two overarching topics, I think, and I'm covering, I hope I'm right, I'm covering like 16A to 16A to 22B. I think that's what we're basically covering. So, 22B should be today, 22 should be today, Daf Kaf Bet. So you'll get that. Also, maybe later on in the day if you're learning it. But one idea, and it reminds me of the film Life is Beautiful. It's a sort of a controversial Holocaust film where made really almost a comedy about the Holocaust, but a beautiful Italian film. And I think the theme of it is how sometimes we pretend, that Jews throughout history have survived through sometimes sort of delusion, illusion, kind of making things up. And there is so much of that in Masechet Sukkah. We've touched on Lavud before, we get to Lavud again. That is, it's within 3 handbreadths, it's considered touching. And then we good asi, good achi, goes up to the sky. As long as it's 10 handbreadths, it goes down. We're going to get to a concept of Chabut Rami sort of later on in what we've done over the week. Chavut Rami, which is sort of it presses down and is thrown down, even though it's not really there. We get like vertical illusion and horizontal illusion, and then we touch on that whole idea of, we'll get to, of Dofen Akuma, of the sort of the wall kind of a sukkah bends in and it stretches out in an imaginary way. What seems like the roof is really the wall of a sukkah for 4 cubits. So it's fascinating that in these laws, there's just a lot of pretend that enables us to have a kosher sukkah or a kosher eruv, or we looked at the laws of sort of boundaries on Shabbat, and then sometimes it's about whether it's about impurity. So it's fascinating how we have all these, they're not just gimmicks, and Rashi always says that God sat down at Sinai and taught Moses these laws. And so it's part of our tradition. Maybe it's a way of really, we're able to survive. I say in the morning, you could say all these sacrifices in the morning. I say them almost every day, and it's kind of again, pretending that we're back in the old days or something. So that's one thing. The other theme that comes up a lot is intentionality. And we'll see that soon, that a lot of sukkah, a lot of the law of sukkah is how you view something. Are you viewing it? What purpose is the schach, is the bamboo matting? What purpose is a lot of these things? Is something temporary? A bed, is it temporary? Is the sukkah sort of a permanent dirat keva? Is it living, permanent living? So intentionality is very important. So now let's run through those two themes. Okay, so we're continuing on 16a. We're continuing the idea of the broken bed and parts of the broken bed, and it touches on mikvah, touches on impurity, issues of impurity. But one view of, and this is using it for parts of the sukkah. But one thing that's interesting, I found interesting, is this idea of that rags. We talk about little rags, tiny little bits of cloth. Lo chazia lo la'aniim ve'lo la'ashirim. So one view is that, little rags, poor people don't need them, rich people don't need them. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit empowering. I love when the Gemara, it's really not clear what direction they're going on social justice issues, but it's kind of one thing that brings, I guess, a little dignity. Even a poor person doesn't need a little tiny rag. Maybe even a poor person doesn't need a 5-cent tip or something like that, and then on the other hand, there is another view that hoel umekli ka'atu, that if something comes from a vessel, it is a vessel. So don't demean this little kind of piece of a bed or something. If it comes from something that really is a vessel, it is a vessel. Again, that's kind of the imagination that is critical to the laws of Sukkah. We come to a very important law of digging into the haystack, Hachotet Bagadish, the classic law of Taseh Shalom Min Ha'asui. You actually have to build the Sukkah. You can't just have the Sukkah magically appear or kind of dig it. So the schach has to go on something that you build. It goes back to that. I guess President Obama used that line. It didn't originate with him, but you didn't build this. So to understand that we are all getting a lot of help in what we build and what we do in this world from our environment. But Ta'aseh Shalom Min Ha'asui, it's very important that the Sukkah is built, at least at one point. Those walls were built. Beautiful on the Mishnah on 16a that, and then there's a whole long discussion that carries us through the Daf of 16 of how high off the ground can the walls be? Can there be like a gap between the walls and the ground? And one of it might be, if it's 3 cubits, it might invalidate them. We have a lot of different opinions, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, but one beautiful thing of image that we should have in our mind is the ones that don't like it being, let's say it's pasul, it's invalid when it's more than 3 handbreadths, let's say about a foot off the ground, because that's the amount kadeshis daker hagdi. That's enough room for a goat or a kid to walk under. So, when you think about a mechitza, whether it's in your synagogue, whether it's for an eruv on Shabbat, some kind of barrier, it's an interesting point that, if a goat can walk under it or a little kid, then is it really a barrier? But there's a whole disagreement. And I love that when we're comparing Sukkah to the laws of Eruv on Shabbat, so just because it might work on Shabbat doesn't mean it'll work for a Sukkah. But then that's a question of which is stricter. So a sukkah is an obligation of the Torah. All the laws of creating barriers on Shabbat so you can carry in an area, the laws of Eruvs are rabbinic. So if it works for a sukkah, it should certainly work for an Eruv. If it works for an Eruv on Shabbat, it might not work for a sukkah because it's in the Torah. But then, hey, wait a second. Shabbat is... what can I say? Shabbat's much stricter than Sukkah. You violate Shabbat in general, big, fire and brimstone. Sukkah is a mitzvah. It's wonderful. We got to do it. It's great, but it's not as serious. It's a positive mitzvah. So, that's a whole question. Which one is stricter? And just interesting to think about, actually, conceptually, what makes us approach mitzvot in strictness. First, the people that really care maybe only about rituals, and when it comes to ethics, well, that's not a big deal. So, or the opposite, when we might prioritize ethics and rituals are not as central to us. Some people prioritize minhag, a custom, and it's a little tiny mention somewhere of a custom that we have to keep. We've always done it this way, where some of the big commandments are not as strict. So we see that the Talmud struggles with this issue that we're struggling with today. Love the story of Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yishmael, great name, Yishmael. Our tradition says that Yishmael, son of Abraham, Ishmael did tshuva and was righteous in the end. And so it's a perfectly legitimate name. My name is Ismail. But Rabbi Shimon bar Yossi is going to appear a bunch of times over the next couple of amudim and dapim folios. And love this story. It relates to how they were able to carry a Torah on Shabbat with, again, the walls touching the ground or not touching the ground, creating a space where you could carry the Torah. But the context is, and I'm a rabbi of a small shul, Eitz Chaim in Huntington Woods near Detroit. Shachachu v'lo hiviu sefer Torah me'erev Shabbat. They forgot to bring the Torah from Erev Shabbat to shul. Like, can you imagine, like, well, who was responsible for bringing this Torah? Shmuley, did you bring it? Yishmael, did you bring it? No, I thought I thought the Gabbai. So anyway, you know what? Our tradition, they figured out a way. Go back to Blue Greenberg, where there's a rabbinic will, there's a halachic way. So they figured it out. And it touches on our, what we're dealing with. Question comes up. Can you have a double lavud? Can you have sort of the middle part solid, and then you have lavud within 3 cubits, handbreadths from the top, and then within 3 handbreadths from the bottom? Lavud is that thing that if as long as within 3 handbreadths, it's considered, touching. Does that work? Can you double that up? How far can you go with your imagination when these imaginary ideas? So we're getting to great question or point on 17 on Yud Zayin, that the difference. So let's envision the top of the sukkah, and you have your schach, and let's say there's a gap between the walls and where the schach is. So think vertically. Like there's let's say you have a couple of bamboo poles that are holding up all the evergreen. And the evergreen leaves are the schach, but there's a gap between where the roof starts, where the bamboo pole starts, and you just stick a little bit of evergreen in the middle. So let's say there's a gap. So a beautiful, interesting concept that the avir posel basuka, sometimes having nothing there, again, between the wall and where the schach starts, is worse than schach pasul min hatzad, than having, let's say, metal, a metal roof. You can't have a metal roof that's not schach, or a plastic that's not schach. But let's say you have a little bit of that coming from the roof until you get to your evergreen. Well, that's before we talked about dofen akuma. That's like, well, we consider that part of the roof. So I want to, push this idea that saying nothing is sometimes worse than saying the wrong thing. A lot of times we go to a shiva house, you don't know what to say to someone. Someone had God forbid, a tragedy. I remember there was a tragedy in our community in Chicago, and the parents of the child who was killed would say, in the parking lot of the school, people just kind of like want to avoid me, don't want to say anything, I want to avoid me, rather than just coming up and say, I'm so sorry. And so sometimes we say the wrong thing, but our halacha in this way says sometimes don't worry. Sometimes the wrong thing is wrong, then it's worse than not doing anything. Speaking of German Jews, I had this, which I was talking about before we started. There's a concept of fine schmeck, of maybe it's sort of the not letting the perfect, whatever, ruin the good. It's like trying to be so perfect. So here it says sometimes nothing is worse than something that's invalid. I want to get to, so there's a whole discussion of that, and it's 4x4 and this and that. And one thing to remember, interesting, if you're reading it in the Aramaic, when it says arba'ah, that means 4 tfachim. When it says arba amot, that means 4 amot. Sometimes it's confusing. Are we talking about handbreadths? Are we talking about cubits? And so arba'ah, just playing arba'ah. So since it's actually in the masculine arba'ah, 4, that means 4 cubits, tfachim. If it's arba'ah in the feminine version of 4, that means 4 amot, cubits. But these come up. Big discussion again on 18a. again with eruvs and tuma, and is there does lavud apply in the middle of a sukkah, like in the middle of the schach? But then I'm going to, very technical stuff, but Rabbi Yishmael bar Rabbi Yossi appears again in a story, and he's kind of giving us the flavor of what rabbinic life is. And he talks about that abruma sharia, fish that came from a certain river of abruma are good. Different river flows will tell us which fish are kosher or not. It's not that the type of fish is, it's just that the fish might have a lot of bugs, I guess, on it. And it makes me think about, I just heard that there are issues with fish being able to swim through streams when sometimes they build overpasses and they divert the water under the bridge, and it's not flowing enough, or it's flowing too fast for the fish. So, environmentalism within Masechet Sukkah. In 18b, it talks about the idea of you just have a roof that sticks out with no walls. Is that considered sort of coming down? And I love Rashi. I'm going to give this Rashi again. I just can't get enough of him, and he repeats it a lot of times. When a technical question of, is the a wall made for a balcony, or can we consider it, is the roof, or let's say a roof sticking out, does it work for only a balcony? Can it work for a sukkah? And for the aksadra, mechitza l'aksadra hu da'avadi, we say these boundaries are made for a balcony. Okay, it's a little technical stuff, but Rashi says here, Dichi agmare rachmana l'Moshe, when God, Rahmana, God was Rahman, like Rahmanus, mercy. When the merciful God was teaching Moshe these technical issues of Sukkah. So you can imagine it's Mount Sinai. I guess, I would say it's after lunch, but Moshe didn't eat for 40 days. So he's in the 40 days, and somewhere in the 40 days, they get to Masechet Sukkah. Again, stick with me. When God taught them Lagud Achit b'Mechitza Sulachalo Shalah, when God taught it to Moshe about how the roof was considered sort of coming down. If you have a roof, it's considered like it's a solid wall almost. So God taught him that it only applies to the interior walls, or an interior place, and not the exterior. So whenever, is going on, it's fascinating that this kind of image, again, of these laws, they're not just random laws. The view is that, wow, Moses was there studying them. And you interpret that any way you want. And but it was important for Rashi to give us that very clear image. Then we get there's a discussion. If the only the roof sticks out, maybe it doesn't work. We had disagreement between the two academies in Babylon, Surah and Pumbedita. And then we talk about, if it has petzimin, if it has kind of doorposts, that helps it, that makes it. But a lot, what I want to touch on this, and this is sort of the end of Yud Tet Amud Aleph of 19a, is intentionality. So if there is let's say it's a roof sticking out or something, is the intention of the architecture of a house or a place for the inside or for the outside? Is it just decorative? It just happens to stick out, but the focus on the inside, or is it focus on the outside? And if the focus is just for the inside, then these kind of different coverings and walls might not help build a sukkah, because there needs to be real intentionality that this place is going to be my house on Sukkot. and even there is the tour. One of the halachic authorities says you have to, when you're saying Kiddush at Sukkot, when you're sitting in the sukkah, you have to think about what does this mean? And, we can interpret it many ways. We can say this means that God covered the children of Israel in the wilderness with the holy clouds, with the, you could think that. Or you can think Sukkot is a holiday where we really connect with nature and we appreciate how vulnerable we are, how much, nature is important, how we see, that we have to care for nature. Whatever your interpretation is of Sukkot, the halacha, the traditional law, pushes us to think about it, not just to just do it by inertia. In 19B, great idea that mud, soft mud, might not be okay to dunk in to purify you if you dunk into a beautiful pool of mud, which makes sense, but it can be used, it can be mitzaref. Mitzaref aval hatovel bo lo alta lo tvila. You can combine a little bit of muddy water to your nice pure mikvah, to the 40 se'ah, the 40 whatever measurements that you need for a mikvah, but it can't be the only thing. It's kind of a beautiful idea. There's a big tradition in Judaism that a community, we need a little bit of the muddy types, and we're totally good. A shul, a synagogue can't be totally made of mud, but a little bit of mud, it's okay, it works. We continue with the law of the slanted sukkah. The sukkah kind of like that just slants into a wall. Is it a roof? Is it a wall? That's a question. We might need another handbreadth in between the wall and the other wall. So I'm sorry to do it this way. I really wish I could demonstrate better. But, maybe a tefach, maybe a cubit will save us and make it kosher. Big halacha, oh my gosh, 5 minutes. I'm really sorry. So, okay, big halacha with mats. This really comes a lot. Can I use a bamboo mat for my schach? And the great question, was this manufactured for resting on, for stomping on? Then it might be pasul. If it was manufactured for a covering or for like a curtain, then it's kosher. So, and we actually, this is something, let's say you don't know what it was just manufactured. No one thought about what it was going to use for. That's another question. So this is actually comes up. I want to give a shout out to Arizona with, that whole, the wonderful people that are trying to figure out the votes and looking for bamboo bits. But really bamboo is a big issue here. And in general, you go to your Jewish bookstore or whatever, you buy a bamboo mat, but it's not used it wasn't made to be a mat, it was made to be a covering. It's kosher for a sukkah. Kaf Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yossi appears again and is happy with, different kind of, is happy with mats, with bamboo mats. He's a happy camper with that. And beautiful on 20a, it talks about Rabbi Chia, Hillel, Ezra, restored the Torah coming from Galut, coming from the exile. As much as the Talmud and the tradition is like, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, our Torah comes from Zion, but these people helped restore the Torah. So beautiful, beautiful idea. And again, we get a lot of, it's interesting that on Sukkot, which, maybe start out really as the holiday of going to Jerusalem, of being Ola Regel to Jerusalem, and the temple holiday becomes a holiday where everyone can celebrate wherever they live, all over, Petach Tikva, Kansas City, Japan, New Hampshire, wherever you're living. So there is this lot of talk, I think, thrown in to Galut. Rabbi Hanania says, when I went to Gola, to the exile, I met the people of Machuza. So you have people from Israel impacting the people in Babylon. You people have Babylon going to Israel. So on 20b in the Mishnah, really unpack this, the story of Tevi, the servant of Rabban Gamliel. It's who sat, this is a whole question of a bed in a sukkah. Can you sit under the bed? It's an interesting, like, he says Tevi is so clever because he slept under the bed, and that shows that servants that doesn't need to observe this commandment, even though they need to observe all the negative commandments. They can't work on Shabbat, all that. Kind of, I don't know how to feel about this. Is this like lovely that they have a warm relationship with Tevi's servant? And I guess, look, this is 1,500 years ago, 1,800 years ago. So, but it's interesting, something that makes us think. 21a has this great idea of, do we learn that the walls have to be made from human products like the temple? So Yalif Ohel Mi Mishkan, do we learn from the sanctuary all about this? And then it really goes into a whole thing of, for the red heifer, and using a whole question, when can you use animal products? When can you use have to be human products? Can you write a get, a divorce document on an animal non-human product? So that gets debated. And on a 21, you'll learn about Chavut Rami and that crazy concept of things going down, things going up. Again, an imaginary idea of, let's pretend that this wall or this roof or this whatever it is goes all the way down, all the way up, side to side. So again, that imagination. Really exciting stuff is, can you build on 22b, can you building a sukkah on a boat, on a cruise? Is anyone cruising now? I don't know, but you can build your sukkah on the cruise boat and you can use it on Yom Tov. But if you build it in a tree, you can't use it on Yom Tov. You can't use it on the holiday because you're not allowed to, according to the rabbis, climb a tree. So the next pages are going to all talk about using animals and all that exciting stuff. And then stick with this, because we're going to get to who's obligated. If you're caring for sick people, are you obligated to? Are you dismissed from the mitzvah of sukkah? And if it rains on Sukkot, what happens if it rains on Sukkot? Oh my goodness, the rain in Detroit has been crazy this summer. And finally, at the end of next week, in a week from now, you'll get to Lulav Hagazul, the classic case of a stolen lulav. How can you imagine someone wants to fulfill a mitzvah by stealing? Well, Jews are capable of anything. So really, Yesher Koach, everybody, and a lot of technical stuff here, but really good stuff coming up. So looking forward to learning with you some more.